You get a prize for lasting this long, so well done for making the last session in Congress. It's been a bit of a journey, hasn't it? 4 days, 4 different ties.
Wow!
All on Twitter. No, it's just been great, and I think what I just asked you to do. Well, first of all, thank you for coming, and thank you for staying the journey. I think I've thought long and hard about what this session was going to be about, and I don't want to keep you any longer than you want to be, or I need to keep you. But I suppose my job as Congress convener is to send you away with something to do, some homework, something to think about, but more importantly, I want to give you some encouragement. I want to send you away with some encouragement and to say, look, I hope you've had a nice time. I've had a great time, and I've listened to some fantastic things in the last 4 days. I wish I could have got to all your papers, and I couldn't. That was the biggest frustration for me. And we've heard some great things that we can build on. We've got some work to do, and we're in a new world. And I just want to talk about that because I think it would be remiss of me not to say something about what happens after the thing that we've called a global pandemic. The thing that was on our risk registers as organisations that we never thought would happen. We'd seen films about it, haven't we? But we never really thought it would happen. And I know there's people in this room that are carrying enormous pain and hurt on the back of that, both personally, domestically and organisationally. But I think COVID has also given us some great opportunities. And one of those obvious opportunities is that a lot of us in our church context have had to think about doing church slightly differently and just recalibrating slightly. So what does that recalibration look like for us in sports ministry and sports chaplaincy? We had a theme of servant leadership. We started there, so I'm going to finish there and take us on from there. And what I'm going to talk about in the next half an hour is, first of all, let's just remind ourselves about what servant leadership is. And secondly, I want to then jump into what I'm calling servant partnership. Can we take our servant hearts and put them into a partnership mentality? Now, here's the thing. I know you're doing this anyway, so this is more of an encouragement than anything else. These are observations, but they're encouragements. You're all doing this at an individual and organisational level. I think what I'm saying is I want to encourage you to do it more. I'm talking to myself here. I get this wrong, you know that, and I need to do better. There'll be lots on the slides. I'll read a bit of it. You can ignore it. Put your feet up. Just kick back a little bit. What I do want you to do is just come out of the stuff you've been thinking about. We need to just go up to strategic level at this point and just think a bit up here and think a bit bigger. Think about the organisation you're working in or organisations you're working across. And let's just have a think about this servant leadership into servant partnership. There's nothing on any of these slides that you don't already know. We often talk about servant leadership and make assumptions about what it is, but we rarely interrogate its meaning as a conceptual idea and its associated behaviours and practices. I've been a Christian 32 years, and I don't agree with them. I'm being really honest with you. I love my church, I love the people I go to church with. I've never heard anybody preach a sermon on servant leadership, specifically in an interrogative way. I've never heard that. That's not a criticism. In a post-COVID world, traditional working models of working in para-church and church organisations will not be enough for the promotion and flourishing of missional and kingdom activities. It won't be enough. We all do missional stuff, and we've got to remember that we all do that stuff, and it's very different to most of the people in churches. We're already ahead of the curve here. We've got the traditional church has got something to learn from us. We're okay, we're all in the same boat, and we just need to push that on a little bit. That's an encouragement. But in this changing social context, we'll need to think smarter about strategic partnerships in line with a servant partnership approach and mindset. I'm pitching this. You can disagree with all of it. Do it later, send me an email. And because of that, I believe it's incumbent upon us as leaders in sports ministry and sports chaplaincy to be servant leaders and servant partners. Strategic partnership. What's servant leadership? Let's do this bit, just remind us. Servant leadership has become increasingly prominent in wide debates. I work as a leadership consultant, mainly with organisations that are secular. It's brilliant because I can do servant leadership and not talk anything about religion or spirituality, because servant leadership since about 2004-05 has become a legitimate part of corporate life. It's now not just accepted, but even in the UK, lots of people do servant leadership and want to know more about it, and don't think you're a Christian or from some other religious worldview if you want to talk about it. It's fantastic. It makes my life really, really easy. And those kinds of discussions give us insight into different ways in which ethical, person-centred and values-based approaches to leadership might play out, both in faith-based and secular organisations. And we know that this concept's been developed by theologians. Ironically, there's much more about servant leadership in secular leadership and management texts than there is in theological literature. I'll come back to that. In the panel discussion the other night, Graham Daniels rather modestly did a little throwaway about servant leadership, and he quoted Robert Greenleaf's book, 1977. Greenleaf wrote a book that is the seminal text, and it's a lovely book, and it's like it is. Greenleaf's not alive now, but it's a bit of a meandering tale. It's almost like he's writing to his grandmother, and it takes a little bit deciphering, lots of pages. Probably you could have condensed it into 10. But on page 27, that's not a criticism, that's just an observation. On page 27, Greenleaf says this. This is his definition. You have to look really hard for it, and you can see the dots. I've had to take a couple of bits and pieces out. The servant leader is servant first. It begins with a natural feeling that one wants to serve first. Then, conscious choice brings one to aspire to lead. To serve first, then to lead. That person is sharply different from one who is leader first. For such it will be a latter choice to serve. After leadership is established, the leader first and servant first are two extreme types. The best test, and difficult one for a minister, is this. Do those served grow as persons? Do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, free, more autonomous, more likely to themselves become servants? The key thesis of Robert Greenleaf's book is this, and this is the benchmark and the test, the litmus test of it all. If we're servant leaders, all of us, the only way we'll know that is if the people underneath us go on to become servant leaders. That's a kingdom narrative. It's about multiplication. It's an imperative. It's a non-negotiable for us as Christians and leaders. It's a non-negotiable. But do they go on to be servant leaders? That quote's fantastic, and it haunts me, and it should. Servant leadership is based on the replacement of self-interest. It's about others, not ourselves. Servant leaders engender notions of collegiality, trust, fairness, respect, humility, relationship, and an intentional interest in the well-being and potential of others. We've heard all this, haven't we, this week? It's fantastic, but a great reminder. Servant leaders seek to impact the lives of others to the extent that they themselves become other-oriented and catalysts for organisation and social transformation. Robert Greenleaf's other bit, and you have to really dig it out and you have to get to the end of it. Here's the big thing that he says. He says, and he's coming out of Quakerism, he's got a Christian worldview. He doesn't call himself a Christian. He says the role of he's writing this in 1977, the role of the church in the 21st century is to teach Christians to be servant leaders, not so they can make nice churches, so that they can go out into society, run secular organisations and transform that society. That's the role of the 21st century church. I like that. I think that's missional. I'm sure I read that somewhere. This approach appears counter to the individualism of contemporary social life and the authoritarian and hierarchical regimes of more traditional organisations where profit is often prioritised over people. Give me culture over profit every time. That's tough, isn't it? You know that, I know that. We work in organisations, we run organisations, but we've got to put people first. So, how might we apply all of this to partnership working? I just want to go through some, this is simple, you know it, but I just want to now move from us as servants to thinking about how we take that servant heart into a partnership conversation and mentality. And remember what I started with. In this new world, strategic partnerships are going to be critical. Thinking about partnership, key issues when embarking on partnership working. When we're thinking, if it's important to create partnerships across our organisations, what kinds of things do we need to think about before we start to do that? Let's just go back to basics here. What do we need to do? What do we need to think about? 1. How to carry out initial scoping and due diligence exercises with your chosen or potential partners. Think carefully who you partner with. Think carefully. Might look alright on paper. How to think about a strategy, justification and rationale for your approach to partnership working. Why are we doing this? Think about biblical principles around partnership, relationship, community, working with, hospitality, social justice, spiritual nurturing, serving and servant leadership. It's got to be part of your rationale. Thinking about key values, trust, respect, responsibility, co-production, co-creation, sustainability. There's no relationship without trust. There is no relationship without trust. A relationship without trust is a transaction. Just some reminders for us in terms of where partnership working often goes wrong. And we're talking on a global scale now, a global basis. Historically, organisations in the global north, and particularly in the UK and the US, have often approached partnership from a position of unequal power. The imposition of a certain way of working on, or doing things to people, rather than with them. Co-creation, co-production. And this includes the church and missional ventures. I know some fantastic charities in the UK who've done some brilliant work and they've been well resourced. And I watched them go into the global south. And they run in and they do some brilliant, fantastic stuff and they pour resource into it and they say, this is how you do it. Here you go, this will work because this works where we come from. There you go. And then after 10 weeks, 2 years, they say, get on with it. And then they wonder why it collapses within 6 weeks. All that money, all that effort. It's not because they're bad people. But if we don't co-create with those people we go and work with, then it's not sustainable. We need to listen. We need to listen to people's voices. That's part of the due diligence process. For this reason, organisations from the global north have often been seen to dominate working relationships with those from the global south. We've got a whole history of this. This goes back hundreds of years. It's still going on. I see this in sport development all the time. Such forms of dominance can create a sense of dependence or dependency, which in turn can undermine co-production, co-creation, co-design, and therefore undermines independence and sustainability. Yeah, you know this. And so, what I've got to remember is the things I'm involved in terms of partnership, we've got to stay away from this as best we can. We might think we're helping, we might be enabling. We might think we're creating independence and sustainability, and we've got to be careful we're not creating a dependency mentality with the partners we're working with. Strategizing partnership. When developing a strategy for partnership working, consider these things. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Why is it a good idea to have this partnership? What and where is the need for your joint initiative or venture? Is there a need? sometimes do some work with charities that are fantastic, and they get to the end of they get to a point where their work is petering out. This happens with some of the businesses I work with. And brilliant team, brilliant people, fantastic work, and they can't understand why their product isn't selling or isn't working. And one of the reasons is that they are absolutely in love with the product they've got. They love it, they're passionate about it, they've refined it and refined it, honed it, tuned it, you name it. They love it. And there's absolutely no need for it out there. And that's devastating, isn't it, some people? They've had this thing in their head all their life. Society's changed. Is there a need for our product? Don't get wrapped up in what you love about your product, because people might not want it or need it anymore. Who and where are your key stakeholders? Those who have an interest in what you do. Churches, church leaders. Existing partnerships or strategic alliances. Secular sports providers. Parachurch organisations. Identify your key stakeholders. Who are they? Who and where are your key gatekeepers? People of influence, people of power, people of peace, inside or outside of your potential partner organisations. And non-Christians. Some of the people of peace I find in organisational life aren't Christians, but they're leaning into me, they get it. Does your joint initiative or venture supplement and add value to existing provision? You know what I'm saying here? The need to avoid duplication, replication, the need to be politically sensitive around the mission or business needs of others, particularly funding. There's a lot of sectors where this is going on, duplication, replication. It's nobody's fault. It's because perhaps they don't know what's going on elsewhere. But let's think carefully before we partner. Let's look at what else is going on. This is part of the due diligence process. Levels of partnership. How do we bring a servant kingdom mindset to partnership working? One way to do this is to think about different levels of partnership and how we can adopt countercultural and counterintuitive approaches. So, let's just summarise. We're called to be servant leaders. We want to be servant leaders. We're servants first. And now we're thinking about putting that heart at an organisational level, into the conversations we have between organisations in our big sector. I've got 4 levels of partnership. I've made these up, by the way. You don't have to take any notes of this at all. It's just the way it's how I understand it, and it's just the way I've learnt to present it. By the way, my students, some of them are in here, they're absolutely bored to death of hearing this story. They've had it I don't know how many times. Traditional partnership level 1. We enter into working relationships with individuals and or organisations because we know that ultimately we will benefit in some way from these arrangements. That's a nice business model, that. Get that? I do that. Yeah, I have to. What's the chair of my board going to say? Andy, what do the numbers look like? Are we selling things? Yeah, good. We're in partnership with so-and-so, yeah. Is that helping us? Yeah, it is. Great. Traditional model. Happy? Yeah. Level 2, conventional partnership. We enter into working relationships with individuals and or organisations because we genuinely believe that there are mutual benefits to be gained. How are we doing, Andy? Yeah, we're working with so-and-so. What does that look like? We got a little bit out of that? Is that a win-win? Is it a win-win? We get something, they get something? Brilliant. Happy with that? That's ethical, it sounds right, board are happy. We can all sleep at night, can't we? And really those 2 levels are probably what goes on in most of our organisations, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And that might be the way we carry on forever. That might be the way God wants us to carry on operating. And what if it's not? Level 3 servant partnership. We enter into working relationships with individuals and or organisations fully aware of the fact that the other party or parties may well benefit more than we will. The chair of my board's really going to like that one. I don't think it's Andy. I'm not quite sure about that. And that might be what God wants us to do. And what if it's not? What if there's a bigger risk? What if there's something called kingdom partnership that says we enter into working relationships with individuals and or organisations knowing that we have absolutely nothing to gain and to the outside world everything to lose? What's my chair of trustees going to say about that? She's going to say, I want to talk about that next time. Elizabeth Bounds yesterday, brilliantly, talked about courage. And she talked about the extremes of that virtue. And she talked about recklessness versus passivity. Now, I've certainly had this conversation with some people, and they have quite rightly, in my view, quite understandably said to me, Andy, that's a really interesting idea, and you've probably thought it when you sat in a dark room somewhere, but A, keep it to yourself, and B, that's absolutely reckless. But I believe it's kingdom. Now, I'm not saying, I run businesses, I know how this works, I'm involved in businesses and charities. I'm not saying that any of us can adopt that model entirely. But what I am saying is, I think for all of us, there's a conversation around: are we doing some of these things? Is there a piece of what we do that fits into some of these brackets? In my world, that might look like pro bono work. What do I do for free? And some. What do I do for free? And what do I do and it costs me? Yeah? But at an organisational level, I'm challenging myself and I'm asking us all to think about this as a sector. I'm asking us all to think about it. Because I'm making a connection and joining the dots between a servant heart and servant leadership into the way we actually lead our organisations and the behaviours and approaches that we take inside those organisations. And I'm fully aware that we are accountable to the people above us, and they may not think like this, but we might have to lead up a little bit here. And leading up's about persuasion and influence. I'm just coming to land now because I'm conscious of time. I want to push back on this stuff. I'm just pitching some things here. Take it or leave it. The development of strategic partnerships will be central to the flourishing of organisations in a post-COVID world. I'm going to add to that. I'm going to squeeze it a little bit. I believe the development of strategic partnerships will be central to the survival of lots of organisations in a post-COVID world. That's what I'm hearing at the corporate level. I'm watching charities and businesses in this country close every week, hundreds and hundreds. And one of the ways to mitigate that, as far as I can see, is strategic partnership. That's not jumping into bed with the first organisation that comes along. That's about strategic partnership, strategic thinking, along the lines of some of the things I'm kind of pitching. Is there a need for the intentional redevelopment of strategic partnerships across the sports ministry and sports chaplaincy sector, and a servant partnership culture within and across individual organisations? I don't know. That's a question. You'll answer this when I see you at Baylor. This is just to think about for a few years. In terms of lessons learned from the COVID pandemic, my suggestion is to myself and yourselves that we should take time to reflect upon and recalibrate our outlook on partnership working in order to reevaluate the benefits both to ourselves and others. I think it would be remiss of us not to take some of those lessons. Here's what I'm seeing in corporate life, and I understand it, I get it. I get caught up in it myself. COVID's happened. We all had to do something to survive. Most of our organisations have survived. Brilliant, fantastic piece of work. And I believe the smart money now is to build in a period of reflection and recalibration. What are the lessons we've learned as an individual organisation? How can we get smarter and sharper and work in a slightly different way around this area and others? But the draw for me right now in an organisation is I've lost 2 years' money. I haven't got time to reflect and recalibrate. I've just turned the treadmill up another 10 notches and everybody's coming with me because we've got to make up this much money that we've just lost. And by the way, the world's opening up and we'll reflect and recalibrate when it slows down. And hey presto, it's not slowing down. I'm working with people in organisations like you are, and you may be having this experience. The people I'm working with, both in organisations and particularly the people I'm doing leadership work with, senior level, they are exhausted. And the leaders are telling me, Andrew, my board is telling me I need to hit this number very quickly. It's totally unrealistic. I'm going to my people and my people are saying, there's nothing left in the tank. And it doesn't matter how good a leader I am, they are running on fumes already. And the board is saying, come on, target's just gone up. Now I know that some of us are in that situation. I know some of you are in that situation as leaders, but also as people who are trying to hit those new targets. Where on earth is the room to recalibrate and reflect? I'm suggesting, people say to me, Andy, I can't afford to recalibrate and reflect. And I'm saying, you can't afford not to. And what I'm also suggesting is, only by adopting a servant partnership approach can the sports ministry and sports chaplains, etc., achieve its kingdom potential during the next decade and beyond. And you can take any or all of that or leave any of it. I'm going to close there and take some questions, I think. Is that all right?
Anyone with any questions? I will come to the mic.
Right.
I have one. Especially the bit at the end reminds me of some work that's been done around the pandemic and pandemic as trauma. And that would certainly match with what you're saying. And the need in a trauma curve, you get the reflection bit here before you can go back to where you were performing before. Is that stuff you've come across, stuff that you've engaged with in this?
Yeah, it's a good question, Robin. So some of you are familiar with trauma-informed practice. I'm assuming some of you know that stuff. So I think a lot of organisations are realising, big organisations are realising that people are traumatised by the pandemic, just at the next level of exhaustion. And so they want to adopt a trauma-informed approach, and they're bringing that on stream, if you like. What I can't quite work out is whether they're doing that because they feel they have to, or whether they're doing it because they genuinely want to do things slightly differently. But I do think a trauma-informed approach is part of that new world. We're going to have to have that, and so we're going to have to be trained in that way, particularly as leaders. One of the things I often say to people is, when you do one-to-ones with your staff, it's all right saying that you're aware of trauma, but if you're not trained in that, you can't hear it. People don't say, Andy, I'm traumatised. Trauma's between the lines, it's not on the lines most of the time. So, yeah.
And it seems to me that what you're saying there, especially about the kingdom values in your number 4, actually inherently sits behind the trauma-informed approach. So that kingdom partnership is actually a kingdom way of coming to strategic partnerships which would inherently have a trauma-informed approach within it. So I find that really interesting.
And look, you know me well enough. I'm pitching this stuff. What I've got to do now is to suggest things that we've all got to go away and think about. That's what you're supposed to do at the end of the conference, isn't it? I've had this stuff on my mind for a long time. You've got it on your mind. I'm struggling with this. I'm really struggling with it. I've got to work it out. So, well.
No. I was thinking through this as we talk about partnership and working together in those things. Some of that's going to require trust, forgiveness, listening. and some bravery. Where does that fit into these models? Because I think this is one of those like, yeah, this is great, this is the end goal. We have to make that sausage, and that's the part of the sausage nobody wants to make. So where do we see that? Where do we take that courage to lead in those ways? Because we always want to be the person who goes second in those. Nobody wants to put the toe out first.
That is a really good question. It's helpful. I believe we've got a great community. This is a great community for me. I believe we've got a fantastic relationship as a community. We'll always have some bits and pieces going on, like any community, but for me this is very different to any community I've ever worked around. And this is, we're asking some big questions here. I'm not saying we should deal with them, address them, whatever. I'm just asking to think about them. And the answer might be, Andy, we're not bothered, thanks very much, we'll see you in 2025. But I do think that we have a strong enough relationship between organisations in our community to do something collective and meaningful here. And I don't care whether it's a 1 degree difference next year or the year after in 3 years' time. Or even if we just push the conversation a little bit further. Will's right, it's going to take some courage for any of us to put our head above the parapet, but all I'm trying to do is to put this on your radar to have a think about it. In theory, I should be the person that then does it, shouldn't I, with an organisation. So I think we've got great relationships. I think we know this stuff, we do it anyway, we're in far better shape than a lot of professional communities. And actually, I don't think there are for a lot of the organisations in this room who are already doing the vast majority of this, I don't think this is a big next step. The question is, I think it's important that one organisation doesn't have to do it on its own. I think it has to be a collective effort. I think it has to be an agreement, collaborative. We need to create safe conditions under which this kind of thing goes on. We model it, we try it, we test drive it, see if it works, and then we've got something to work with. So that's personally what I would encourage people. Jane.
Do I have to use the mic?
Yeah. Oh, why not?
This came up in one of our sessions, not about Kingdom Partnership specifically, but we were talking about it, if you recall, everybody, that with the athletes in elite sports, what happens when it gets to a point where they realize that going further is not kingdom?
Yeah.
Just step back. And I've experienced this in my life too, even as a pro. When something's not going the way that I think is kingdom, will I step back? Will I say I can't do it? Or when I'm told I can't preach Jesus anymore? Because I hear this all the time about, well, it's my job in the secular system as teachers or profs. It's my job, I gotta teach this, I gotta teach that. But I think it relates because we need to live kingdom. And kingdom partnership, I think, is just part of that. I really think that's wonderful. I think that we're called to do something even if we don't get anything back. And to live that way is such above, that's like, we talked about the Beatitudes, living the Beatitude life. How this is the Beatitude life, this is what I see as the Beatitude life. It's because when we're meek and we know how big our God is, we trust He's going to take care of us. The Bible says He's going to take care of us. So if I'm not happy in something I'm doing, or I'm pushed to do something that isn't right, can I say, well, I guess I'm supposed to move on? And that's what you're saying to us. You're calling us, it's very uncomfortable and scary, but you're calling us out on what, do we have those inordinate affections? Do we hold money or power or career or whatever higher than our love for God? And do we have the courage to walk away?
It's great. This scares me to death, by the way. It really does, at an organisational level. But what I know about you guys is you're servant-hearted, individually. I know you are. I see it. I've seen it here. Incredible bunch of people. We're already doing it. Test drive a small step. Do it with one person, do it with a group of people. Build it up to your organisation, do it in a part of your organisation. Do it in your marketing department. Let's go and do some pro bono. Test drive it, small steps, bite-sized chunks. Great.
Yeah, Andy, can you speak into this? What struck me most, you brought green leaf to my attention a few years ago. If you're a certain stage in life, and there are some in this room, the green leaf thing seems even more pertinent in the light of what you've said today. If you're non-executive, if you're a trustee, it's not your job. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Greenleaf's very, very big on that. So very subjectively, being a 60-year-old guy who you find yourself at those stages in life on boards, Ashley Knowles said the same, you come to a stage where you've got your day job, but you're on the board.
Yeah.
And actually, it strikes me that if any woman or man in this room is in those positions, you've got the best opportunity to be the person that facilitates this. So much harder if you're employed on the staff. You're always doing due diligence, strategic partnerships, trying to be generous of spirit, and rightly so. But in the end, it's the non-exec, it's the board who call it. Is that a fair reflection for people, not necessarily older, but in those strategic positions?
I think it's a great point, Graham. So I think there's a bit here. I just ask, it's for us all to go away and think about. It's just, look, I'm just pitching some stuff. But I do think there are individual, for all of us, there's an individual piece of work here that we're called to do right now in our organisations or individually. And it's about age and stage and where we are and influence and persuasion, and leadership's all about influence. That's it. What can I influence? I can't change anybody, but I can model something and I can influence something. That's all I can do. I'm in a position to do that. I need to reflect and recalibrate. I need to put a little bit of time aside and think about the organisations I'm involved in. And think, right, Andy, look, what can you influence right now around this, around servant leadership, strategic partnership? Yeah? I need to go and do that. I need to think about it, and I'm asking us all to do that. And there's a benevolence here. Start some conversations, have a think about it. I have a mentor, and he hammers me about servant leadership all the time. He's brilliant. And he once said to me, don't forget, Andy, when you meet somebody on a one-to-one, and you know I get this, don't get this right. When you meet somebody on a one-to-one, the last thing you should always say to somebody is, how can I help you? What do you need me to do? He does it every time I see him. I've asked him some ridiculous things, but he always says that to me. And it's a throwaway, isn't it? But it's so important, and I've got to mean it. And sometimes I say it and I think, I hope they don't ask me for anything. That's just double my to-do list. But I mean it when I say it. I mean it. I want help. Now, you and I know. It goes back to James' point. You and I know. If I do this, God will honour me. If my organisation does this, God will honour my organisation. That might be a long burn. I can't be reckless. I'm not talking about poor stewardship. I'm not talking about throwing resources away. I'm not talking about, that's not where I am. I'm talking about something slightly different. Where can I see an organisation with a need for something I've got, really clear, I've got, and I can go to them and say, for no apparent reason, there you go. You can have that person for one day a week for the next 6 months. We don't want anything for that person in kind. This isn't about money. This is a stewardship question. I've got some resource, I've got a little bit of slack in the system. Why don't you come and, we need to upskill somebody, we can't send them on a course. Why don't you send that person half a day to us? They can come and sit in the office, do this with us. Put that person out on the road, come and have a placement. For a senior leader who's absolutely exhausted, come and have 2 weeks. You can have an office in our building, nobody's going to bother you. There's all sorts of things there. There's 1,000 different ways to cut this. I'm conscious of that.
I think we must just have time for one more, if there's one more question.
Jason.
this may be a simple question, but we talk about servant leadership, and many times we talk about the danger of just being a leader. Is there also a danger of just being a servant? And what is the difference between just being a servant and a servant leader? And then even in a partnership model, how does that look?
That's good. So, all I would say to people is there's a difference between being a servant leader and a doormat. And there's a very clear boundary, and Jesus was brilliant at this. And there's loads of times when Jesus showed the people the soles of his feet. And it's just worth, there's a model there to just, he did not suffer fools, really didn't suffer fools. Took himself away and refreshed and recalibrated on a regular basis, even when they were clamouring for him. We need to think about that as leaders. So servant leadership and doormat are a completely different thing. That boundary's got to be strong. If that blurs, we're in trouble. And there needs to be I need mentors around me for that. I can easily step into doormat and get that mixed up. And similar to an organisational level, it's the same principle. We're here to help, what can we do? We've got something you haven't got, etc., etc. But we can't, what we can't do is spend our resources and energy to the detriment of our focus and the calling we've got as an organisation. That's a boundary. And it's a really good question. It's important we don't get that mixed up. I'm really conscious of time. I know people have got to go. Can I just say, I was just going to say, I know lots of you have got to rush up. I'm around all afternoon. I'd love to talk to you some more if you want to come over to Ridley. I just want to say I'm really thankful that you came. Great few days together. It's gone really quickly, I think, and I would have really liked to have some more time with you. And I want to apologise if I haven't managed to have some time individually with you, and I haven't, do forgive me for that. But I am around the next few hours, and I'd just encourage you to keep these conversations going. Take or leave any of this. That's just me. That's just what's in my head, and I just thought this was a useful time to share with you.
Thank you. Just give me a round of applause. That is the end. That is the final presentation of the 3rd Global Congress on Sport and Christianity. And just from Ridley Hall, we also want to say thank you for coming. We hope you enjoyed your time here. We want to pray for safe journeys back. And being at Ridley, I would not be forgiven if we didn't close in prayer. And I haven't asked Simon to do this, but that is his 2-second warning. As our chaplain, I thought it was only appropriate if I asked Simon to close the Congress in prayer.
Heavenly Father, so much to think about, so much to wrestle with. And in all of that, we give you thanks. We give you thanks for partnership. We give you thanks for the world of sport and the athletes that we serve. But first and foremost, and only, we give you thanks because you are God. And in serving others, we serve you first. Heavenly Father, give everybody a safety as we journey to our parts of the world. Thank you for all that we've learned, for our equipping and for our friendships and the unity that is to come. In Jesus' name, Amen.
Amen.